I wanted to go back to that tiento piece, five piece before we go on, because I really I relate to that focus on rhythm in a way, but I kind of like I tend to focus on the dynamism, on how it moves forward, on how it kind of like, for me, rhythm is kind of like the spinal cord of my music in a sense. In
Okay.
many ways, it will combine with how David Felder used to say, to talk about gestures, about the gesture. It's more about the gesture and how it pushes onward and onward, and rhythm is kind of like that line that connects everything within the piece, at least for me, from my point of view and from my music, how I compose, how I think about music. That's on the, let's say, on the foreground level. We're talking about rhythm, right? But then I will say that in I would like to uh, hear you talk about like the form, because we have there like some dances. Oh,
Hmm.
yeah, about that. I It's like probably it doesn't show that much in my music, like the nationalistic, the folkloric element of Puerto Rico, but in a sense, it's kind of there, but more conceptually, and
Hmm.
not that much in like it will sound. But I think that you go back and forth, like, well, the form goes back and forth, the sections between dances, between chorals. It's like you are splitting time, right? And I think that we share that kind of aesthetic, and probably it's because of our influence from an influence from Stockhausen in a sense.
Hmm.
Uh,
Moment form, yeah.
Comic forms, of course. We were both into that. We've talked about that a couple of times, and it's like, yeah. How do you think about form? Do you can Is it kind of like a result, or do you have an image beforehand? Do you want it to sound like or view it in the score in a certain manner? How do you think about form? Because I'm really interested in this topic too.
Yeah, well, as I said, a lot of my ideas when I'm composing come out of pitch material.
Okay.
So whenever I'm thinking about form, and everything starts out with the pitch material, and the transformations that go on with that pitch material, and both rhythmic and timbre, um, they they are all looking for moments of, let me see, uh, well, you know how they talk about stratification, or the isolation of certain gestures, or events, or moments within different, how you say it, levels. Well, each moment within my piece, each event, is a different isolation of that initial intervallic or pitch material. So whenever I'm thinking about form, it's okay. Well, this part will isolate these pitches, or um, these intervallic distances. This part will expand upon them within these procedures that I establish. This other one will eliminate these two, or this one will add any pitch that was maybe not in the initial sequence. So whenever I think about form, I'm thinking about what am I adding to those pitches? What am I taking away? What am I expanding? Or what am I combining? So the different sections that come out of each piece are really a result of how I am manipulating those different intervallic distances. Because above all, I do choose pitches whenever I'm starting out, but I'm really mostly thinking about intervals.
Okay. Okay. Because also another thing that I noticed is like when you, well, what you were talking about earlier, or we were about nosen, the unison, like the
Hmm.
ensemble seems to be working together most of
Hmm.
the time, and
Yeah.
that would be a key difference on how you and I will view rhythm, because I will try to, okay, sometimes do that, but in the end, I will work towards layering. I love layering on different
Mhm.
rhythms. Whereas this, it would be like, this is here, this is here, this is here, this is here.
Yeah.
Um, and it's, I think that in the end, the result of your forms are more cinematic,
Yes.
and it's kind of like, this is a scene, probably a mellow scene, and it's kind of like elongated time. And then here we have a more rapid, like car chase scene or something like that. And then, but then we go back, and then we go forward, and we kind of like, I really like that. Honestly speaking,
Oh
um,
yeah, I think that cinematic forms are a great way of viewing how to structure things, because I mean, unless you're doing a very long take, which is or a continuous take, um, directors are always thinking about the cut. So where do things end? And
mhm.
I think in my mind, in one way or another, I am also always thinking about cut. Okay, now let's go to the other, or let's return to this after cutting to this. Um, and if you and after you saying that, you can think of my intervallic distances and my pitches as the different characters, and every block or every take is a way of they are trying to find new ways of transforming within that specific space.
That's cool. You've talked to me about, like, also there's an influence. You are a photographer too, and you
Yeah,
have a strong influence from Tarkovsky, and you've read Tarkovsky and kind of used his theories on your music. Do
yeah.
you care to speak a bit about that?
Well, I think that piece Tiento Five is also a piece that was very much influenced by Tarkovsky. In fact, there's a poster of one of his movies right there, Solaris.
Yes,
um, but I think that a film that really struck me at one point in my life was a film of his called The Mirror,
the mirror. Yeah,
Zerkalo in Russian. And then I think that movie, when I really loved that movie, also because it's very much based on different blocks and different images and different points in time, which go back and forth between the different stages in the life of the main character. But what really impressed me was when I read about how he did the piece. Really, each take was done almost separately, without at first knowing exactly how the entire film was going to be constructed.
I didn't
And
know that. Hmm.
yeah, and then he started kind of mixing them up and playing out with them, and then the entire film came through out of the order that he chose. So it's another interesting way of visualizing structure, in which you have all of these different takes and all of these different moments, which are related within themselves through material, through gestures, through interactions, through different dialogues that the materials have between them. But you're not necessarily so sure about the order yet, and then you start playing with the puzzle. And I think it's something very fun that we should all do. Just play around with, what if this comes for first? What if this comes later? What if we mix these things around? And given that a lot of my music is very sectional and very block based, I at times I don't really write the initial parts as the beginning. I write a part, I write a section, and then I start saying, well, what comes before this or what comes after this. So a lot of times in my music, I'm not really thinking from A to Z. I'm thinking about uh, building bridges between different sections.
And I will. That kind of reminds me of Cabrera's teachings in a way. Like sometimes he
Yeah,
would say that, well, if you have the ending first, write it first and work towards that and stuff like that.
yeah,
Uh,
and a lot of times, a lot of my thinking about the structure comes out of the instruments that I have.
Definitely.
Uh, so whenever I have a series of instruments, I focus on what similarities do they have in register and timbre? What are their differences? What some do, what can others not do? And so those differences and those similarities, in a way, start becoming part of the structure of the piece. So if all these instruments can play this note in this exact register, why not make use of that at some point in the piece? Everyone can play this um, D in this register. So that would be interesting if everyone would be playing it at some time and then dividing it and going somewhere else. Or if you have very high register and very low register, well, that could be a very interesting effect of living the middle without nothing in a blank space and having this very uh, disparate range between them. And the opposite can as well be a way of visualizing the structure. So instruments also have a very important way of defining how I visualize the structure based on what they can and can't do.
I think that, yeah, particularly the slower parts kind of remind me of later Tarkovsky movies like Nostalgia, for example.
Yeah,
You have these
nostalgia, the
really
sacrifice.
long takes that are like, they make you, they push you towards self-reflection. It's like you have to self-reflect in order to, you have to be in a very particular state of mind, like almost meditative state of mind, to view this kind of movies.
Yeah, if you look at nostalgia, one of the final scenes where there is this character going with a candle walking through
Through the
a
people.
pool through a pool.
Okay.
He
Oh
is
yeah.
he has to cross an entire pool
Mm-hmm.
with a lit candle and making sure that the candle does not go out by the end of reaching the pool.
Mm-hmm.
And you are watching this guy with a candle in his hand cross an empty pool for about 3 minutes, which in cinematic time is a lot of time. Um, and I think it really makes you reflect about duration. What really is long, what is short. Why am I looking at this guy crossing this pool with a candle and it's not bothering me at all? I'm completely immersed in this moment. And in my music, I think at some points I really try to take the time to do that with sounds, in the sense that why don't we just focus on these specific sounds? In Tiento 5, you can see it through those momenti fermi, those still moments that it's only one, then two, then three notes, and you're listening to one sound, listening
It
to two sounds.
I will add that it not only forces reflection but also forces interpretation.
Hmm.
You have to interpret it for yourself. It's like, okay, so there's this guy with the candle, but okay, you can see it as something silly if you see it in the literal way, but when because of the time it takes, it also forces, and because of the reflection it takes, it also forces an interpretation for yourself, which creates a psychological connection with
Yeah,
the art form in itself.
yeah,
And I kind of like that about how you try to move that from cinema from to music. Like
yeah.
I
I
find
think that a way
interesting.
that I try to do it is like I told you, with that perspective of focusing on very specific sounds. And in another piece of mine, I think I sent it to you, Donde Tu, which
Hmm.
is a longer piece for ensemble and voice. Um, the All the material is based on Scriabin's mystic chord, and specifically a gesture that he does in Vers la Flamme, towards the flame. So it's very much in line with Tarkovsky's Candle. And I I every section in that piece, in one way or another, is focused on different aspects of that specific sound. And you just hear it in the beginning, where I literally put in the score, Scriabin's from Scriabin's Vers La Flamme, and then you never hear it again. But all you hear throughout the rest of the piece is all the ways in which I have manipulated it, where I've verticalized it, put it in a linear fashion, isolated the major second motifs. And then in the end, I use the the sonority as a way of reaching um, a tonal center in the end, a tonal progression, which was kind of crazy. I still don't know if it works well or not, but I like it.
Yeah, I think that the artist that is searching for means of expression, means of expressing himself and in new ways is always on that search. That is our truth. Is kind of like I will know if it works, but I need to try it.
Yeah,
It's a it's a need, and
and then
it's, yeah.
Mhm.
Sorry.
and my way of working with this thing, especially when I was doing the PhD, I became really interested in this idea of uh, masking borrowed materials or using borrowed materials, and a lot of the pieces that I wrote within my thesis were based on borrowed materials, including this one Donde
Mhm.
too. And I think that I saw masking as the way of repurposing, reconfiguring, or rerouting a borrowed material. And it still is a big way of how I see uh, music in
Mhm.
general. How can I take something and make it into something else, which is a big part of what all composers do at one point in their lives, or constantly throughout their lives. And in my case, I did it a lot with Puerto Rican folk music, but also with music that was not folkloric at all, like Scriabin.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes composition is about like the process and trying new things. Um, as an artist,
And
like I know for me personally, like I have a hard time judging the quality of my work, like and like to be like, okay, this work is compositionally stronger than this work of mine, because I can tell you like which works I'm more attached to, but a lot of it has probably nothing to do with um the piece, the final product. It has to do with like the process.
definitely, uh,
Yeah.
I think that is pretty awesome that we've reached like this is episode like 36 because we can compare with other composers that we had before and your view on music, or at least this particular view, I think that uh, kind of resonates with Nomi Epstein's view of music. Like you see,
Yeah, and
when you
very different music though.
they are very very different.
Like completely opposite music, but
Yeah,
yeah,
but conceptually, theoretically, like how he
they have that
explained,
playfulness.
I
Yeah,
like with the Scrabbing
and
mixed chord.
thoughtfulness.
I will say that it's kaleidoscope. I don't know if if she used this term or if I'm just coming up with it, but kind of kaleidoscopic listening. You are
Oh yeah,
listening to
yeah.
the same object. You're viewing the same object, but from different points of view, from different angles, and trying to figure out, kind of like appreciating the different angles, reflecting
Hmm.
on the same object. Even the aspect of reflection that I mentioned, it reminds me of Epstein.
Yeah,
Uh, she's
Yeah,
an American composer, a friend of Megan's. Uh,
she
yeah.
teaches at I think New England. No, not New England. Berkeley, I think. She
mhm,
teaches in Boston. Um, is that the? I think it's Berkeley.
yeah. No, I
But
think
Uh,
that my
yeah,
my
Berkeley.
my my view comes around. Wait, going back to Donatoni. I mean, he never escapes my life. But I think that it has a lot to do with the concept that he discussed a lot, which he called rilettura or rereading.
the
You know,
lectura.
Uh-huh.
rilettura, rereading,
Yeah.
which is his way of or his take on
Is that
variation.
how you write it?
Yeah, rilettura.
Okay.
Um, and
Reread.
then yeah, and then the way of visualizing materials and through variation is has to do with all the properties that are combined when you choose an ensemble, when you choose a different instrument, when you choose a different when you choose your different instruments and you choose your timbres and you decide, a way of transforming can be by simply developing the timbres and the textures, or isolating certain properties, or eliminating certain properties, and that gives what he used to call an angular variation. So it's not just variation in the traditional or classical sense. It's really thinking about taking away, adding, juxtaposition, superimposing, and giving that kaleidoscopic view, which is, I think, is a great way of putting it, and masking those materials, giving them different ways of presenting themselves to the listener. And at each point in the piece, you have a moment to step back and listen or perceive or appreciate a very specific detail of one of those qualities.
uh, we're
Yeah.
saying it like this way, we're describing it this way, but as we're talking about it, it's kind of like it's as old as we can remember in a way, because it's kind of like in counterpoint, going in like retrograde, inverse retrograde. It's like you are using the same material but listening to it in a different manner. It's kind of like pretty pretty awesome. I'm using this that word today. The thing is that we musicians, even though we have all the technical um, lexicon to describe the music, like we can work with the materials themselves, we usually tend to go out and metaphorize, use metaphors to, for even if only for ourselves, to visualize our music, to try to kind of like comprehend our own music, even if we are working in the abstract all of the time, even if we are not trying to do programmatic music or anything like that. Something, just something that I want to put out there, because
Yeah.
I thought about it. Even if we are being very formalistic, very formal, we always are kind of like in dialogue with other arts, in dialogue with a more concrete world. It's very very hard to live in the purest type of music, like the romantics will say, or something like that, probably. Well, and not even the romantic, because the romantics have programmatic music, and I'm just like spitting out thoughts here right now. So
No, but
it's
I think we all need ways of going back to things we know, or things that were very close to us. In the end, um, composition is a very spiritual process, you know, and I mean spiritual in a way in which we are connected to everything that we do and who we are and how we visualize life in our own
Hmm.
very specific ways. So it's kind of inevitable to take it out of those experiences, and it's important to embrace it. I think even I at sometimes really try to deny a lot of things, and stay very much driven in just trying to focus on pitch material durations, this and that. And
yes.
but in the end, the results were very bland and very maybe technically very successful, but in terms of those pieces, maybe I listen to them again and I'm like, well, you know, yeah, the counterpoint's there, the structure is there, the rhythms are there, but what else? You know, the what else is what we're all looking for.
The soul, let's say, the inner, the essence of the music, is
Hmm.
hard to put into words. And you use the word spiritual, and people might might automatically think religious or stuff like that. But no, not really. We uh, like when a piece of art touches us in ways that we cannot really describe, touches our humanity, our inner selves. I will say that that's the essence of art. It's kind of like we are having an spiritual experience, even if you are not a religious person. It's like, yeah, and I will say that that's the highest form of art. from my
Yeah,
point of view.
yeah, and that's why it doesn't matter what work we're listening to or seeing, if we're looking at visual arts, or performance arts. I mean, everything that comes out of an artist should be perceived with openness and respect, and should be taken into in those matter in that matter. You should be open to an experience. I think we what we all want is an experience, and we have to be open to an experience within all of our different art forms. And that is the beauty of it. You never know what you will find, but you have to be open to it.
Yes, because we can speak
Yeah.
here about the process, about pitches, about durations, about form, sections, influences, etc., etc. But in the end, what matters is our connection, the connection, the human connection
Hmm.
that we share through art.
Yeah. Well, what you will remember after the performance is over, or after the movie is over, or after you leave the museum, is the experience that you had.
The experience that is thought plus feeling.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of like when you get to that, I
Yeah.
think that if at least you yourself felt that, I think that you've done your job as an artist.
Yeah. I think because we, as you said, we speak about very technical aspects of our craft, and obviously I'm very much interested in craft, but it's because we're between ourselves as composers. We're just talking about how we deal with problems and how we're trying to solve them every day of our lives. But I mean, the audience, or people in general, are not really interested that I, that use this retrograde, or the inversion of this or that. It's in the end, what they will take out of all this is the experience that they have with listening to the piece.
Hmm.
Yeah, probably other composers might be, but audiences at large, I don't think so that much.
Yeah. So, how much do you consider like an audience, or what do you consider your audience to be? Um,
Well, I compose, obviously, first and foremost, for myself. I mean, I compose what I want to
yeah.
listen to and what I love listening to, and what I want to express at that moment in time. And I think uh, what I really want the audience to have is an experience, whether they find it cheerful or frightening, or whatever other word you can use to describe what you listen to. If you left with an experience, and if you have some sort of way of defining that what happened to you at that moment in time left you feeling in some way, well, I think that was the objective, was for you to experience something different. Um,
Yeah.
so I think my job is to, for however much a piece, whatever the duration of a piece may be, give give the audience a the experience of living, or experiencing a different time. We're not now in our time. We're experiencing, or taking some a moment to live within another time. Let's just live within these 15 minutes of however much this piece may be. Let's just take that time to appreciate whatever is happening there, and live within that time. So I want to create
Yeah.
an illusion of being in another time.
So, yeah, can you elaborate a bit more on how you think about time? It ties with what I asked before on form, and how you went from material to from material, one material to another, and stuff like that. It creates, because it all links together, kind of like the experience, the spiritual experience that is transmitted, but also the is well, our canvas is time, but at the same time we influence time. We influence how people perceive time.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, that's our
it,
job.
yeah, every one of us kind of like has a view
Hmm.
on time and how we deal with time.
Yeah.
Right? Uh,
Well, it's a fun thing to do because we don't perceive time the same as steady in our life either. You know, certain things when we're doing something we enjoy or uh, it goes by really fast. But if we're waiting 10 minutes for a dentist to come out and see your teeth or something, that could feel like a long time. So like, it's just kind of another expression of life, like trying to mess with the way time feels because it is it is static in terms of we could actually measure it and quantify it, but it doesn't feel that way. And it feels different. Like I remember, as we age too. I remember when I was very young, 5 minutes felt like a long time. And now 2 hours can pass and it feels like nothing has passed. Um, and so, yeah, it's interesting, I think, to do that and kind of play with that in music too, because there's so much of that in our lives, I think.
Well, yeah, that's kind of like there's always gonna be that dichotomy, psychological time versus chronological time,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
like we're gonna be dealing with that all of the time, right? We have the metronome, play this at a quarter note 80, something like that. But then again, it's kind of like how that time feels, and when, for example, in moment forms or panel forms or in Tiento 5, I kind of experienced that. It's like kind of like, and in Tarkovsky's works, that happens too. It's like kind of like you are experiencing a certain time of way of time in this section,
Yep.
right? And then you pass to this other section, and it's kind of like a different experience. It's like perception snaps, and it's kind of like an 180 turn, and then you're having a different experience, and then you go back. It's like a roller coaster ride in many ways, and that is also part of the experience as much as part of the form itself. It's part of the technical aspect as much as part of the feeling aspect of the art form we involve ourselves in with composition. And I find this very very interesting. I ask like I'm really interested in how composers think about time, because for example, Megan, how do you think about time? Like we've talked about this before. Your forms
Uh,
are very linear. It's kind of like
they're
the
very linear. Yep.
slow development is kind of, but at the same time, there's an uneasiness because in time there's also some feelings attached to how the time itself passes. If you think that the time is taking too long to pass, you kind of get desperate
Mm-hmm.
in a sense or uneasy. It's kind of like all of these aspects of how we experience
Yeah.
the music, but it's also how we experience the world as individuals, as based on our experiences and all of that. And this kind of, oddly enough, takes me to another question to you guys in general. Do you think that because we tend to experiment more with time passing in contemporary music, that it's more it's a bit more inaccessible to the masses than other types of music like tonal music, more traditional, or film music or stuff like that? This just occurred to me
I
now,
Yeah,
honestly.
I haven't really thought about that too much. I mean, I don't know. Like to me, like it's
Because
engaging, especially the extremities are engaging when when time feels like it's passing like extremely slow, but not in a boring way. Like I love like a super like insanely slow glissando or something like that where we kind of think of it being and being done, but it was like it just has this intensity. Is like, when is this gonna end? Like I think as a listener, I would kind of lean forward in my chair and listen more carefully. to a moment like that, and when um, things are moving so fast that it's kind of hard to process in the short amount of time, that can be have an exciting amount of energy. But then if we have that kind of energy for too long, then we just get totally lost and we disengage too. So I feel like um, if we were always to express time the same, at least I as a listener, I think would much more easily disengage than a piece that is um, playing in a variety of ways of how time is experienced. Um, yeah, but I don't know. I'm also might be a very odd listener. I don't know if that's like I can't say that's a generalization of how audiences are. I just know
Because
that's how I would be an audience.
the critique towards contemporary music is always that it has weird sounds. It is very dissonant. But probably it's not about the sounds themselves. Probably it's about the sense of time that we are projecting.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, John
It's
Cage
so much
says
different than
he always
music.
has a quote. Nothing. It's something like nothing um, gets old faster than a new sound. And I find that to be true because like you can see a new sound, hear a new sound, and it's like magnificent when you hear it the first time, and then you've heard it. So it like loses the second time and the third time you've heard it. It doesn't have that like new factor, and it's not necessarily interesting on its own. It's what you do with that sound and that material. I think that makes it interesting. But I always find that um, you can play with. So like I like to play a lot with timbre and experimental techniques and performative aspects and a lot of physicality. But I almost always my piece is in fairly simple linear forms. Um, and I think this the simplicity of the form allows me to be complicated aesthetically and then complicated in other aspects of my music. Whereas if I put it in a complicated frame, it might just be way too alienating, even more than it maybe already is. Um, yeah, I mean, I think certainly somebody could do a little bit different. Like maybe they have more standard techniques, but they have a really unusual chord palette, and maybe they have a much more complex idea of form. But there's always a give and take. So I think if it's like, oh, we're being complex and difficult and challenging and new in like every aspect, then it can be um,
New complexity.
yeah, it can be new complexity. You're right. Which, you know, I don't know if any of us are, trying to emulate that.
Hmm. I think that I think for me, uh, the it's always well, the human brain loves sequences and patterns. So when I think that naturally, whenever we're exposed to anything for the first time, what our brain is trying to look for in order to decipher whatever it is a sequence or a pattern that guides us towards a place that we logically think it will arrive. And as composers, the way we can manipulate time and structure has to do with how we give, how we deliver those expectations, and at what moment do we do that or don't. So a structure can be based on how we don't achieve or don't deliver on those expectations that might an audience or a listener might have. which can be as simple as not resolving a dominant chord ever. You know, that is a way of challenging an expectation. You're always expecting it to do that, and I think a structure can gain a lot of uh, significance and a lot of coherence by playing with those parameters. And I remember reading a lot about and, going back to this cinematic way of visualizing structures. I remember reading a lot of the books that were written by Gilles Deleuze, the French philosopher. And Deleuze has these two books. One is called um, Movement Image, and another is called Time Image, which are, well, his books are called Cinema One and Two, but one discusses what he calls movement image, which is when a film follows this clear sequential progress of events. I mean, the character uh, opens the door and leaves the scene, and then quite possibly the next scene will be that character out of the door in the next place where he's going to be at, while Time Image does the opposite. The character does something and we expect them to go someplace, but then the scene, the cut that comes afterwards, has nothing to do with what we were expecting to happen, which is what a lot of these composers like Tarkovsky or Yasuhiro Ozu in Japan, or uh, uh, oh my god, forgot his name, Abbas Kiarostami in Iran does as well at times in some of his works. So there's this play between the expectations of where things are going and how we deliver on them. And I think in my works I've always maybe gone more for the time image aspect of delivering a next panel or sequence or gesture that maybe does not always have a logical progression to the expectations from the previous one, and and then maybe bringing out those others in a further section or somewhere afterwards to show what they've already become and transformed throughout that time. So it's a way of playing with those ideas. And I think that's something that Megan mentioned about simplicity. I think we take uh, simplicity for granted sometimes. I think simplicity is a very beautiful thing in the sense that
Mhm.
whenever we can explain something simply, it means that we've gathered, you know, a lot of information in order to deliver the most clear, coherent, and simple idea, and deliver the the clearest message possible about that information that we've gathered. So a way of doing that in structures is exactly how she's saying it. She does that with a very brilliant mindset of how to approach musical structure. Keep something simple so that complexity can take over in other aspects. We see that all the time in genres like opera. If any of us have ever read an opera libretto, when you read one of any of these famous operas and you read the libretto, the complexity of the libretto is really way less than the opera itself, and it needs to be at times very simple because
Mhm.
we need everything else to take over or support that which is being said and done.
Hmm.
Definitely. Um, hmm. Yeah. This thing about playing with expectations is like, is would you guys say that it has to there's a general audience kind of withholding from listening to contemporary music, to strange music, even not consider it music in itself. Would you say that it has to do with that in a way? Is that with the patterns are not recognizable, at least as of yet? Will they ever be?
But I think that that people should go into concerts and museums and theater halls and anywhere without any expectation of what the pattern might be. I think you should go in with an open mind and be very much open to whatever happens. And we have established a history of how these patterns work, and we're all taught at our conservatoires and our universities how these patterns work and how you can be very successful at generating them. But I think nowadays what we should all look for is precisely how not to do that, or how we can make that not happen, and give us, I think the beauty is in giving the audience and giving ourselves something else to explore, or
I
using those
agree.
patterns in a way to
Yeah.
diversify.
But I also don't necessarily know if it's our like job to cater to what the audience might accept in this moment, because I think I don't know, I think for me the most exciting concerts I've ever been to were concerts that I've heard something completely unlike anything I've ever been. And it just kind of like changed my perception of what music could be and what like what was possible. And they were just I just left those concerts like on cloud like nine. I was so excited. Um, and I think a lot of people are afraid of things that they've never heard or are unfamiliar. Um, and I think the common reaction is to like disengage because it's like it's weird or or whatever. Um, but I think it's just such a narrow a narrow mind view, and I think I don't know. I think if people could be more accepting of sounds of different patterns of music, then I feel like that acceptance could translate to other aspects. Like, I mean, I don't think it's that far of a stretch to then become, accepting of more possibilities in music or art, and then, be more accepting of more possibilities in people. I mean, I think being open minded is just a positive experience, and I don't think I necessarily need to cater my music to people who aren't open to new experiences, even though probably composers who do, especially in the States, do get more, at least more prominent performances.
And I think that of recognizing patterns in terms of a general or bigger audiences is very well represented through something like minimalism, for example. Like there's a pattern that goes on and on and on, and since the pattern is very simple, then it kind of resonates in a way, but in another way it's kind of like, why did we study, like why did we do a doctorate in contemporary music, in all of this, trying to learn all of these new patterns that we didn't know about before. Like there's an artistic curiosity. I don't know if it's particular to some minds, to some people or not. um the thing is that um, recognizable patterns is like they tend to resonate with the masses, but at the same time it's like, how do we move an art form forward if we're always gonna stay within the same patterns, if we don't introduce like these new ways of thinking? I Because we can create
Mhm.
every piece of music kind of like is obliged to, if it's not already in a recognizable style, like let's say film, most of film music or minimalism or stuff like that, to create its own patterns within its own discourse, right? And then
Oh
how to
yeah.
reach um like more people, or like trying to get more people to open towards that. Probably education.
Yeah.
I don't know it, but I think so, because John, you can talk to us
Mm.
more about like the difference in between European openness towards new music and openness in the US or Puerto Rico or Latin America.
Yeah.
Do you see a stark contrast there?
Yeah, very much so. I think that, I mean, talking about education, and I'm gonna center on music because maybe my experience is obviously very much centered on music. But if we take two very clear examples, one in the United States and one in the UK, that really step forward for contemporary music or music in general and try to educate people, we see Simon Rattle in the United Kingdom with his educational videos when he was with the Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, um, and his his approach, which his videos you can still find on YouTube, was teaching people, and these things were broadcasted in the on BBC, on national television, and he was teaching people about contemporary music, about timbre, about color, about all these composers and how their music's changed. So you can hear or see videos of his on Debussy, on Takemitsu, on Schoenberg, on Wagner, and what he is doing is showing people that they don't need to be afraid of listening to music that does not meet their expectations, or that
Mhm.
the expectations that they have of what music is very different. And another example in the United States is Leonard Bernstein, who we can still see his educational videos with the New York Philharmonic. And when we see those videos, we also see children, we see families, we see tons of people that are constantly looking or receiving that material and enjoying a new experience of what music is and what it can be. But they did the job. They sat down, they built an audience through education, through showing people what is their job, what is the job of these musicians, and that there are composers right now that are very much interested in doing other things. So education, I think, is definitely key in all of this, and it needs to be a really big part of any country that wants to make their culture grow. And I think another great country is and that does that is the Netherlands,
Hmm?
and you can see it there with their festivals, with their funding of contemporary arts, all the orchestras that they have, even in the smallest cities, they have amazing contemporary music scenes. I mean, not only in Amsterdam, but you go to Utrecht or Rotterdam, and they all have fantastic contemporary music scenes and prizes and festivals. And there is life within these spaces, and you can see it by the the art that they display in the walls of their buildings, of the art in their museums. So that there is a very big conscience of artists still being alive, and their work being very important as a contribution to society. I think Mexico also has a, a really great approach to this with the funding that they give, the national funding for artists and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, definitely in Mexico. But you said also reminded me of Esa Pekka Salonen
Of
because
course.
he did that a lot with the orchestra. Like, just people learn the orchestra. Here is what a conductor does. They like the BBC has some videos of his doing that in Mexico. I think like, yeah, Mexican composers are really, I don't know. What would you say? Because you have, yeah, I was going to ask you about this, about, because you presented orchestral, some of your orchestral music in Latin America, right?
Yeah.
And kind of like, how do you see the openness in Latin America? You mentioned Mexico, and yeah, how
No,
do you see it
well,
towards?
Mexico is a very particular case in Latin America because it's such a huge country with such diverse qualities of in every point. But some of the
In
uh,
Mexico, I will have to say like, and yeah, I talked with this with Magnus Anderson because he played the guitar for one of his operas with Julia Estrada. At
mhm.
one point, I wanted to go to the to UNAM, to the University National University of Mexico to study with Julio Estrada because I found his music very very compelling and still do, honestly
Hmm.
speaking. And he has a lot of students that have gone on to make some nice careers, as I
Yeah,
have.
if you look at composers like, well, right now Juan Trigos, who is an amazing conductor and composer, but also people who are in Eastman School of Music like Ricardo Son,
Hmm.
and then Carlos Sanchez Gutierrez, who was also at Eastman School of Music until recently. I think he retired, and you also look at composers like Mario Lavista, who made an amazing international career, was a very important composer. Manuel de Elias. Uh, so there is a huge tradition of Mexican composers with amazing music. A lot of students that have also gone out to be very successful, and then also international figures like well, going back to Franco Donatoni in the 1990s. Franco Donatoni went to Mexico for various years, and also Argentina at some point.
Argentina, my Nora
Yeah, Nora.
studied with him for a while. She
But
has a lot of stories.
Donatoni was in Mexico for at least 3 summers or 3 consecutive years, and they made the Donatoni Festival, which was run by Juan Trigos, Luca Cori, Victor Rasgado, who is another great Mexican composer who passed recently. And well, they brought this really important figure who they had learned from in Academia Quillana in Siena, and then brought him to Latin America. And hundreds of students went to his summer courses and learned from him. But it shows the openness of a country to establish a contemporary music teacher and bring him to a country to teach their students and generate a new forum for for these kinds of figures. So I think that definitely the enthusiasm to bring forward new ideas, new performers, new composers is there in countries like Mexico. And we also see that it throughout history it has also been a refuge for a ton of artists who have fled from their countries or migrated there. It also has so many influences in both the visual arts or in music. So those types of countries naturally will develop a lot of artists and consciousness about art.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very very, how will I say, a topic that will require a lot more of thinking and talking about it. That it
Hmm.
will require its own episode, I will say. Definitely, this phenomenon of why some countries are more open while others are less, or don't they just want to focus on like what is classical, what has already been done, and reproduce it over and over. It's kind of like, yeah, like asking the question of how do you educate people again, like to be more open towards art and the importance of moving the art
Hmm.
forward, of not just listening to the same thing over and over. Like we all know Bach, we all know our Beethovens, right, and stuff like that, but like
Yeah, it's hard.
for
I mean,
something.
there was a time when I was younger, I wasn't open to contemporary music because I didn't have any way to engage with it, and I heard very little of it, and what I did was just like so foreign to me. But it was kind of being around it more and being around people who actually studied it intelligently that could like talk about it, that would lead me to like listen for some of the things that they talked about and then try to engage and listen closer. And then the more I did that, the more I started to realize that I really liked a lot of what I was hearing. It took me being open to it, and that wasn't an initial thing for sure. Um, yeah, and yeah, I don't know, and
All
I
these
think I
things take
had,
time.
Like for example,
yeah,
somebody like other artists can also, through education, do this. Like somebody like Stanley Kubrick. You were talking about Solaris, like and Stanley Kubrick has Space Odyssey, of
Yeah.
course, and they are always compared with each other. Although, well, one can prefer the one or the other. The thing is that Stanley Kubrick, he used Ligeti, he used Penderecki when they were like just coming out, like in something like The Shining. Isn't that a way of educating people, of letting them know these composers exist, and this is like high caliber music that I think that should be exposed to the world. um, I think that there's a lot to think about that over
Oh,
over
for
that
sure.
topic.
Yeah, I think that even more so that, as a performer as well, I think that even more so of showing any caliber or anything beforehand, the first thing I want to do is just show that these people exist. The first thing I want to do is letting people know that they're still alive. You can talk to them.
There are
You can,
people that compose music today, and they are not doing it in a 5-to-1 chord progression. You know.
yeah. I mean, whenever I record
Mm-hmm.
your music, Juan, you know, what I am also doing in a way is saying, people, hey, this is Juan. Check out his music. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know,
I also find like just because I teach a lot of young, like very young composers, like high schoolers mostly, and I also find that contemporary music is like their cop out like reason, like they to not have to learn like counterpoint or um harmony, like traditional harmony, and and perhaps yeah, and they have all these ha- random like harmonies that don't make sense and lines that don't make sense, and then when you try to explain why they're not working, they're like, oh well, it's contemporary music, like that's
It's an excuse.
like it, yeah,
It's
it's
always
an
an
excuse,
excuse.
which is also that's very I don't know, a little bit
It's
disheartening. That's
it's
it's
hard.
and I did not hear that comment from composer, like the composers of that same age, like 10 years ago. Like 10 years ago when I was working with high schoolers,
Mm-hmm.
they were much more willing to explore craft, and even if they were trying to find like their own voices and new ways of expression, they were still trying to make quality work. And I find that there's a lot of people who think like, oh, if it's new, it doesn't have to
Follow any rules, or
be crafted. Yeah.
it's disconnected
So
from
it's
history.
very hard.
Like
Yeah.
somebody like I
So.
remember an interview with Stockhausen, that they asked him what that like if he was trying to break the Western canon of music or something like that, and he was like, no, the opposite. I am trying to uh, um,
Mhm.
elaborate, to contribute to it. I have the deepest respect for the masters. You have to study them. You have to study the history of what has come before in order to um, develop the art form in new ways, like in a respectful manner. He underlined, he emphasized that he was very respectful of all history of music, of all Western music. And yeah, some people, it happens too in the visual art, it happens in the arts in general. We
Mhm.
have to
Mhm.
study and kind of like see the line of the chronological line that we are a part of, and we are continuing towards, and we are heading towards hopefully a new way, new mode of expression that lives within that tradition. And yeah,
Mhm.
that's
Yeah, I
what I
think
would have
that
to
that
say.
I think that for me, I mean, Megan is talking about this students wanting or using contemporary music as an excuse, for
Mhm.
delivering this kind of work that is not very well thought out or crafted, but the it's becoming a problem in all circles. Me having taught at many different levels throughout my life, and I a month ago I was teaching at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, and I've seen diversity of students, and you can see in this generation, like what she said about 10 years ago, it was very different.
Mhm.
It's true. I think that there is a general feeling or a general search for the immediate gratification of just doing something or delivering something without going through the the process, or the journey that is going through the process of creating something, thinking of something, developing something, making mistakes. And we can see it nowadays with the development of artificial intelligence and all of these tools that bring out an immediate result in seconds. And what it's not doing is giving people the process, you know? And what a lot of us learned or developed before a lot of these tools were available is how to deal with the process. And what technique is, or is the way you develop to solve your own problems in your music. That is your technique. And but it comes with the influence of all of these other things that you have, you could say, metabolized throughout your history as a composer. um,
Mhm.
and the result is, this is how I solve my problems, this is how I do my things. And it is not a slow process. It takes, well, your entire life. It's
Yeah, that's the thing, and it reminds me of what I was teaching like these last few days. I was talking about Socrates. I only know that I know nothing, but what is it about? It is well, one of the interpretations that comes out of it is that life is never, you never reach the goal. It's always about the process, and it applies to art so much. It's like if you don't enjoy the process, if you don't take the time to enjoy the process, if you only want results, then I don't think that art is for you, really, honestly speaking, like being an artist, because this is what it is about. We're never gonna have the perfect piece. We're never gonna have the perfect composition. That's why we go on towards the next one. Like it's all about learning how to enjoy the process, because it's never finished. It will never be finished,
Mhm.
and that will be all.
Yeah.
Like I have to
Yeah.
say for today, we've gone on for a long time. Like any closing thoughts from you guys?
No, I really enjoyed our conversations, and I think you have a very thoughtful, beautiful way of talking about like the processes in your music, and I think it is evident. Like I think in the all the vibrantness and the colors in your music is like stemmed from that passion.
No, thank you. Yeah, I think, I mean, I sent Juan some other pieces that you can all listen to them whenever you want and check them out. But I think that
Yeah.
what I want people is to just enjoy the process, as one said. That it's an eternal journey. And if 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 there is something that I take out of composing, is that I am learning all the time, and it's the most beautiful thing ever. Every piece I write, every piece I listen to from other composers, every new composer I discover, I'm learning, and I want to learn forever. I never want this process to end. So it's I enjoy the process, enjoy the journey of being a composer. That's the most important thing.
And
Yeah.
I think that those are the perfect words to close out this episode. So I don't want to say anything else. So I hope
Thank you so much.
everyone, and yeah,
Thank you,
John,
guys.
thanks. It was a very enlightening
Yeah,
conversation,
it was.
everyone. So I think that we're done for today, right? Well,
Thank you, guys.
bye. Be
See you
safe.
soon. Be well.
Bye.